Do not return to a version of yourself you have already outgrown, just because the new version of you has not been rewarded yet. Chosen one, think about what happened recently. Maybe someone gave you the perfect chance to react the way you used to. You could have chased, you could have argued, you could have sent the message, you could have reopened the door, you could have tried to prove your worth, or sacrificed your peace just to be understood. But something inside you moved differently. The old reaction still appeared, but you did not become it. That moment matters more than it seems. Nobody may have praised you for it. Nobody may know it happened. Yet if we use the language of faith, this is the kind of victory heaven would notice. Not performance, not perfection. The victory was the moment an old test arrived, and a different version of you answered. Here is what I need you to see. That decision may be the first real evidence that you crossed a threshold your circumstances have not caught up with yet. You expected transformation to feel powerful. Sometimes it feels strangely empty, because the old thing loses its grip before the new thing becomes visible. That gap can confuse you. You wonder if anything really changed. You look at the same room, the same bills, the same silence, and the same unanswered questions. Then your mind says, nothing happened. But your behavior may already be telling a completely different story. So stay with me, because we are going to uncover three things. First, you will learn how to recognize the invisible evidence that you are no longer the person who entered this season. Second, you will understand why the old identity becomes louder after you start leaving it behind. Third, we will look at why someone can be spiritually sincere, emotionally stronger, and still feel foggy or uncertain about what to do next. That last piece matters. Later, we will return to a neuroscience idea that gives practical language to the gap between inner change and daily clarity. But we are not there yet. First, remember one decision you made recently, a decision nobody rewarded, a decision the old you would have handled differently. Hold it. What did the old version of you want to do? And what did you choose instead? Maybe you stayed silent without becoming bitter. Maybe you walked away without trying to punish anyone. Maybe you forgave without reopening access. Maybe you felt fear rise, but still protected what mattered. These choices look small, yet they reveal who is beginning to lead your life. Here is your first shift. A familiar feeling is not automatically a current instruction. Fear can be familiar. Guilt can be familiar. The urge to chase can be familiar. None of those feelings deserve authority just because they arrived first. If this connects with you, make one simple commitment. Write, I chose differently. Do not write it to manifest anything. Write it because naming a real action helps your mind recognize the evidence that already exists. The question we are opening today is simple. What exactly changed inside you when you made that decision? Do not answer yet. The obvious answer is not the deepest. The strangest part comes after you cross the threshold, because your life can look the same while the person living it is not. You have been checking the outside world for proof that you changed. You look at the relationship, the opportunity, the money, the silence, and the doors that stayed closed. Then you ask yourself the same question. If I really changed, why does so much still look familiar? That question makes sense, but it may be built on the wrong evidence. Real transformation does not always arrive through a dramatic result. Sometimes the first sign is quieter. The same trigger arrives, but it no longer receives the same response from you. This is the invisible threshold. Your inner pattern changes before your environment reflects it. You may still feel the pressure. You may remember the old pain, but the thing that once controlled your next move suddenly has less authority. Maybe rejection once ruined 3 days. Now it hurts, but it does not own your week. Maybe silence once made you send message after message. Now you notice the anxiety. Breathe through it, and let the silence remain unanswered. Think about criticism. Maybe you once explained yourself until you were exhausted. Now you know when another explanation changes nothing. Maybe loneliness once pulled you back into places that drained you. Now loneliness can visit without becoming your decision maker. Those changes are evidence. You looked for proof in what happened to you, but the first proof may be hidden in what no longer happens through you. That distinction changes how you read this season. You may have called these months empty, yet during that same time, you stopped begging for access. You stopped volunteering for confusion. You stopped turning delays into verdicts about your worth. The outside looked quiet, but the inside was learning. This is why visible rewards can arrive late. Character often changes before circumstances do. A boundary can become real before a better relationship appears. Discipline can become real before results show. Peace can become real before life gets easier. And this is where many people make a painful mistake. They return to the old pattern because the new one has not produced a visible reward yet. They assume the lack of proof means the change was pointless. That is exactly when the threshold must be recognized. So, I want you to do something simple. Name one thing the old you would have done that you did not do this time. Maybe the old you would have called again. Maybe the old you would have quit. Maybe the old you would have accepted disrespect to avoid being alone. Now notice what happened instead. You felt the pull, but you chose differently. That choice is not the finish line. It is evidence that a different identity is beginning to decide. And there is a reason this matters so much. If you miss the threshold, you may keep asking the old version of yourself for instructions. You may keep calling growth a mistake simply because it feels unfamiliar. You may confuse discomfort with a sign to go backward. But something stranger happens. You can cross the threshold and still feel the same. You can decide differently and still hear the old doubt. Why? That is the next piece. Because the old identity rarely disappears the moment you stop obeying it. Crossing a threshold does not mean every old feeling disappears. In fact, the opposite can happen. You make a stronger decision, then guilt shows up. You protect your peace, then doubt starts talking. You walk away, then nostalgia makes the past look softer than it was. This can make you think you are going backward. You are not necessarily going backward. Sometimes your behavior has changed before your emotional reflex has caught up. The new choice is real, but the old pattern still knows how to make noise. This is what I call the echo identity. It is the version of you that keeps speaking after it begins losing authority. It remembers what used to feel normal. It remembers what you tolerated. It remembers how quickly fear made you abandon yourself. So after you hold a boundary, the echo may say you were too harsh. After you stop chasing, it may say you gave up too soon. After you choose silence, it may tell you that you should explain yourself one more time. The voice sounds familiar, and that can feel convincing. But familiar does not mean faithful. Old sensation does not equal present instruction. You can feel guilt without being guilty. You can miss someone without needing to return. You can feel fear without taking fear as guidance. Imagine someone who finally stops chasing a relationship that has been draining them. They do not send another message. They do not ask for one more explanation. Yet they still check the phone. Their stomach still tightens. Their mind still creates stories about what the silence means. Did the change fail? No. The behavior moved first. The emotional reflex is still catching up. That difference matters, because people can destroy a new pattern just to escape the discomfort of an old one. This is why your job is not to fight every feeling. Your job is to stop giving every feeling a vote. Let the echoes speak if it speaks. Notice it, name it, but do not automatically hand it the steering wheel. There is a simple test. Ask yourself, does this feeling describe what is familiar, or does it describe what is true now? That question creates distance. It helps you separate memory from instruction and habit from direction. Maybe the old you believed love had to be chased. Maybe the old you believed silence meant rejection. Maybe the old you believed rest meant laziness, and boundaries meant cruelty. Those beliefs can keep echoing even after your behavior begins proving something new. So when the old voice appears, do not panic. Its presence is not proof that you failed. Sometimes the echo becomes loudest because it is no longer being obeyed automatically. That is a very different story. If this lands for you, right, the echo is not my identity. Do not use those words as magic. Use them as a reminder that a familiar reaction does not deserve permanent authority over a new decision. And now, we reach the next problem. What if you understand the threshold, recognize the echo, and still feel mentally foggy? What if your values are clear, but your focus is not? What if you know who you want to be, yet simple decisions still feel heavier than they should? That does not automatically mean your faith is weak. It does not automatically mean you are lazy. Another gap sits between what you know and how clearly you can act on it. You can understand the threshold and still wake up feeling scattered. You can recognize the echo and still lose 10 minutes staring at a simple decision. That is where many sincere people become confused. They assume clarity should arrive automatically once the inner work is real. So they pray harder, they journal more, they forgive again, they watch another message, write another list, and promise themselves they will finally become disciplined tomorrow. Some of those practices can help, but when the fog remains, they start turning a practical problem into a spiritual accusation. Maybe I am not faithful enough. Maybe I missed something. Maybe God is distant. Maybe I am lazy. Be careful with that conclusion. Mental fog is not automatic proof of spiritual failure. You can care deeply and still feel tired. You can know your values and still overthink. You can love God, protect your peace, and still struggle to focus on one task long enough to finish it. Sincerity and clarity are related in life, but they are not the same thing. This matters because an old season can leave more than memories behind. It can leave habits of attention. It can leave constant scanning, second-guessing, mental rehearsal, and the need to check every decision from 5 different angles before you move. The behavior may be gone, but the operating pattern can remain. You stopped chasing the person, yet your mind still chases explanations. You stopped begging for approval, yet your attention still searches every room for signs that you are safe. That is a different kind of residue, and if you do not recognize it, you may misread exhaustion as identity. You may call yourself indecisive when your mind has simply been overloaded for too long. You may call yourself unfocused when part of you is still trained to monitor threats that are no longer present. There is another possibility worth considering. What if the next step is not another promise, but a better understanding of the state from which you receive, organize, and act on what you already know? Later, I am going to return to a neuroscience idea connected to how the brain integrates information, not as a replacement for faith, not as proof that one tool can solve your life, but as a practical lens for understanding why a changed heart can still operate through a tired mind. For now, hold one question. What if nothing is wrong with your sincerity, but the receiver itself is tired? That question changes where you look for the problem. Instead of asking why you are failing, you begin asking what condition your mind is in when you make decisions. Instead of condemning yourself for hesitation, you become curious about what is creating the static. That shift gives you something shame never can. It gives you room to observe. You stop treating every difficult morning like a verdict, and you start looking for the pattern beneath it. And observation matters because you cannot change a pattern, you only know how to judge. The next section is where we name that pattern. It explains why insight can be real, why intention can be sincere, and why movement can still feel harder than it should. There is a name for the space we are talking about. I call it the reception gap. It is the distance between receiving an insight and having enough clarity to recognize it, organize it, and act on it consistently. You can know what matters and still delay. You can understand the lesson and still second-guess the next move. You can feel a clear inner conviction, then spend the rest of the day scattered across 10 smaller impulses. That does not automatically make you lazy. It does not automatically make you weak. Sometimes the problem is that your values are clear, while your mental state is noisy. A clear value does not always produce a clear mind. That sentence matters. You may know you need rest, but still keep scrolling. You may know a conversation is necessary, but rehearse it for days. You may know which task matters, but keep switching to easier ones. This is where people often punish themselves. They turn every foggy day into a moral judgment. They say, "I should be better than this by now." Then shame adds even more noise to the system they are trying to calm. Try something different. When you feel stuck, ask 3 questions. What do I actually know? What am I afraid might happen? What is the next reversible action I can take? The first question separates facts from mental noise. The second exposes the fear that may be disguising itself as wisdom. The third reduces the pressure to make one perfect decision that determines everything. Maybe you know the relationship is unhealthy. Maybe you are afraid of being alone. The next reversible action might simply be creating 1 day of distance. Maybe you know which project matters. Maybe you fear doing it badly. The next action might be 20 focused minutes. This is agency, without pretending uncertainty has vanished. It also teaches your mind that movement does not require total certainty. You do not need perfect confidence before movement. You need enough clarity to take the next honest step without handing the decision back to the old identity. And this is where the message changes. We started with a quiet choice that heaven would notice. Then we saw the invisible threshold. We recognized the echo. But the deeper question is no longer whether you have changed. The deeper question is whether your internal operating state is ready to support the person who made that change. Because becoming someone new is one process. Consistently perceiving, deciding, and acting from that new identity is another. That distinction is the bridge between inner transformation and daily life. It is also why I asked you to remember the question about the receiver. What exactly is receiving the information, sorting it, and turning it into action when your mind feels crowded? In the next part, we close that loop. We are going to look at the missing piece without turning it into another reason to blame yourself. And before any practical tool is mentioned, you need to understand the why, the what, and the what behind this entire pattern. Remember the question I asked you to hold. What if nothing is wrong with your sincerity, but the receiver itself is tired? We can finally close that loop. Why can someone know they have changed and still fail to move differently in the moments that matter? Why can insight be real while movement remains inconsistent? The missing piece may not be another message. It may be the condition from which the message is being received. That condition affects what you notice. It affects what you ignore. It affects how quickly you connect information, how long you stay with one thought, and how much energy a simple decision seems to require. This does not mean every difficult choice is a brain problem. It means conviction, memory, attention, fatigue, and decision-making all meet inside the same living system. So let us make the pattern plain. The WHY is this. Old identity patterns can keep shaping perception after your values have started changing. Your heart can say, move forward, while an exhausted pattern keeps searching for danger, permission, or certainty. The what is equally simple. You need more than inspiration. You need practices that help protect clarity, reduce unnecessary self-condemnation, and make it easier to act from the identity you have already begun building. And the WHO matters most. You are not someone who needs to prove worthiness to God by becoming perfectly focused. You are someone learning to operate more consistently with the growth that is already visible in your choices. That is cognitive closure. The pattern is no longer mysterious. You crossed an internal threshold. The old identity kept echoing. Mental noise made the echo harder to separate from present truth. Then the reception gap made action feel less consistent than your growth deserved. Now notice what this changes. You no longer have to interpret every hesitation as failure. You can ask whether fear is speaking, whether fatigue is speaking, or whether a real value is asking for action. That is a more useful question. The clarity you have received can be real, but clarity understood is not always clarity embodied. There is a difference between hearing the right message once and creating conditions that help you live from it repeatedly. This is also where practical tools can enter without becoming spiritual substitutes. A tool cannot tell you who you are. It cannot choose your values. It cannot guarantee an outcome. But a tool may still be worth evaluating if its purpose is to support attention, focus, or mental clarity. That distinction matters. Nothing I mention next should be treated as a blessing you must purchase. Faith is not for sale, and no audio program can replace prayer, responsibility, sleep, medical care, or wise decisions. A practical tool can offer a structured routine and something specific to test. If its claims interest you, examine the method, the evidence offered, the terms, and whether it fits your needs. Earlier, I mentioned a neuroscience idea connected to how the brain integrates information. That is where we are going next. The historical research and the product built around a related concept are not the same thing, and that distinction matters. So before you hear a product name, keep the frame clear. We are not moving from God to a purchase. We are moving from a spiritual insight about identity into a practical question about clarity. Can a short daily routine help some people feel more focused, organized, or mentally present? That is the question worth evaluating, not whether it can make you chosen, not whether it can force a breakthrough, not whether buying something proves your faith. In the next section, I will show you the specific program, how its creators describe the mechanism, what users have reported, what it costs, and what the guarantee actually offers. Then you can decide for yourself whether it deserves a place in your routine. But the deepest point remains unchanged. You do not need another tool to become worthy. You need clarity about what is already changing, and enough agency to choose what supports that change without surrendering your judgment. Remember the question about the receiver. Now we can connect it to the practical tool I promised to explain. The historical starting point goes back to research by Dr. Roger Sperry, whose work on specialized functions in the two brain hemispheres contributed to the Nobel Prize in 1981. That research does not prove any commercial program. It does give us useful language for thinking about coordination inside the brain. The creators of the program I am about to mention say their approach was designed around that idea of greater integration. Before I give you the name, consider two experiences shared in the program materials. A nurse from California described feeling as if life was happening around her while she struggled to feel mentally and emotionally connected. After using the routine, she reported feeling clearer and more present. A business owner from Texas described mental fog, slower decisions, and the sense that opportunities were passing before he could organize his thoughts. He said the same short routine became part of how he approached focus and decision-making. Those are personal reports, not guarantees. Your experience may be different, but both stories point toward the same question. What happens when someone who has done inner work also gives deliberate attention to the condition in which they think and decide? The program is called the Genius Switch. Its creators describe it as an 8-minute digital audio sequence designed around what they call neural sync technology. The routine is simple. You use headphones, relax, and listen for 8 minutes each day. The creators say the sequence is intended to support more coordinated activity across the brain, rather than giving you another motivational message to remember. That is their explanation of the mechanism, and it should be evaluated as a product claim. This is not for everyone. It may be worth reviewing if you have already done substantial inner work, but still want a short routine aimed at supporting focus and mental clarity. It may also interest you if you are tired of collecting advice and want something practical to test. It does not replace prayer. It does not choose for you. It does not make you worthy. It does not determine whether you are That distinction has to stay clear. According to the product information, access is digital and remains available after purchase. The listed price is $49, while the current offer, described in the materials, is $39. Because offers can change, review the official page for the price available when you look. The package also lists 4 bonuses. There is a guided visualization, a grocery shopping guide, a classic manifestation book, and an infographic built around 5 daily habits. The offer also describes a money-back guarantee, so read the exact terms before deciding. If you want to examine the Genius Switch, use the official page linked in the description or pinned comment. Review the method, the guarantee, the price, and the claims for yourself. Then decide whether an 8-minute routine deserves a place in your day. The larger point is not the purchase. The tool is not God. It is not obedience. It is not a blessing in digital form. At most, it is one practical option you can evaluate for supporting the clarity with which you meet your own life. Now return to the deeper message. Even perfect clarity would not help if you kept demanding external permission to become who your recent choices already prove you are. The next shift is about evidence, and it changes how you read what has not happened yet. You may still be waiting for the outside world to confirm what the inside has already revealed. You tell yourself that when the opportunity arrives, then you will believe you changed. When the result comes, then you will finally feel ready. That order keeps your identity dependent on circumstances. It asks external evidence to authorize an internal transformation that has already begun. This is what I call evidence reversal. Look at the sequence. Identity shapes perception. Perception influences decisions. Decisions become repeated actions. Repeated actions accumulate into consequences. The visible result often appears at the end of that chain, not at the beginning. This does not mean you pretend the result already exists. It does not mean you deny reality. It means you stop demanding that reality reward you before you allow a healthier identity to guide your next decision. Think again about the choice we opened with. Maybe nobody apologized. Maybe the door did not open. Maybe money did not suddenly appear. But the trigger returned, and it no longer owned your decision. That is the evidence you nearly overlooked. If we return to the language of faith, that is what heaven would notice. Not the size of the reward, but the quality of the response. Not whether everything became easy, but whether the old test still had automatic authority over you. Imagine an ordinary morning a few months from now. Nothing dramatic happens. You wake up without reaching for validation. You do not rehearse an old conversation. You know what matters today, and you begin. There is peace, but not passivity. There is clarity, but not perfection. You still face uncertainty, yet it no longer forces you to ask everyone who you should be. You can pause, discern, choose, and move. That future is not a guarantee. It is a picture of what becomes possible when your actions begin matching the identity your recent choices already reveal. If the 8-minute tool mentioned earlier feels relevant to the clarity side of this process, the official information remains below. Review it on its own merits. What matters here is the larger decision. Stop asking the old version of you to interpret the life you are building. The old identity keeps asking for familiar evidence. It wants the same people to approve you. It wants the same conditions to feel safe. It wants certainty before movement. But you are learning another order. You choose from values before applause. You protect peace before proof. You take the next honest step before every question has been answered. That is how a new life can begin. While the scenery still looks old, ask yourself one question. If I were no longer trying to protect the old version of myself, what would become obvious? Maybe the answer is a boundary. Maybe it is a phone call. Maybe it is rest. Maybe it is finally beginning work you delayed. Do not turn the answer into pressure. Let it become information. You are not trying to force a future. You are learning to recognize which decisions belong to the person you are becoming. If this is your moment, write, I will not ask my past for permission. You are not commanding the universe. You are reminding yourself who gets to choose now. There is one sentence I have not given you yet. It answers the question we opened with, and it explains why the quiet choice mattered so much. We close that loop next. Now we can close the question that has been open since the beginning. What exactly did you do that mattered so much? You stopped giving an old identity automatic authority over a new decision. That is the answer. You may have felt the old fear. You may have heard the old voice. You may even have wanted the old response for a moment. But when the test returned, the person answering was no longer fully controlled by the past. That is why the quiet choice mattered. It was not dramatic enough for applause, but it revealed a change in who was making the decision. Imagine another moment ahead. An opportunity appears. A relationship asks for a boundary. The old version of you would panic, overthink, and ask everyone else what to do. The new version pauses. You listen. You separate fear from truth. You decide with humility, and then you move. The new life may first look like a new way of choosing. This is where I leave the selling behind. No product can make that choice for you. No tool can tell you what God requires. The deepest work is still yours, and the deepest grace was never something you could purchase. Take a quiet moment now. God, help me recognize the growth I once overlooked. Give me wisdom when old fear returns. Give me patience when evidence arrives slowly. Help me protect peace without becoming passive, and help me choose clearly without becoming proud. Teach me to forgive the person I used to be without handing that person control again. Help me honor what I have learned. Give me courage to keep healthy boundaries and clarity to take the next honest step. I do not need my past to approve my future. I honor the quiet choices that prove I have changed. I do not confuse familiar fear with present truth. I do not condemn myself for every uncertain moment. I protect clarity. I choose from who I am becoming. I will not return to an identity I have already outgrown, simply because the evidence has not caught up yet. And if you want to imagine what heaven would celebrate today, let it be this. Not that you were perfect. Not that you never felt the old reaction. But when it came, you understood that you did not have to obey it. That is the victory. That is the threshold. When tomorrow brings another familiar trigger, remember this. The feeling may return. The echo may speak. The outside world may still look unfinished. None of that erases the choice already available to you. You can pause. You can discern. You can choose again. Every time you do, the new identity becomes less like an idea and more like the way you live. If this message gave language to something you have been experiencing, write, I have crossed the threshold. Let it remind you of what you observed, not promise instant results. Stay with this channel for more messages about faith, identity, and practical clarity. Carry one sentence with you. You are not waiting for the old season to release you. You are learning to stop asking it for permission.